So there's a lot. Just to be clear, revision is one of those things, like everyone here should generally know how to manifest. You should know how to imagine. I'm sure if you've purchased this workshop, then you've at least watched me enough to understand what I'm talking about here. And you probably know how to imagine, um, how to manifest, right? Is that generally correct? Raise your hand. Perfect. We have a very interactive group. I'm glad about that. By the way, for those of you who don't know, I do a Q&A call 2 weeks after this call. So if this stuff or any other question whatsoever that you have about manifesting, if you're not a part of that, consider doing that. Revision Masterclass by Joseph Alai. So introduction. And I know almost all of you have been to my workshops before, but in case you don't know me, I'm 30 years old. I live in San Diego, California. I'm originally from New Jersey, central New Jersey. I moved out to California a few years ago, probably 3, almost 4 years ago now. I don't even remember. I love teaching manifesting. Manifesting is one of those untapped. There's been a lot of work done on it. However, with many false premise. So I'm very grateful and very honored to be on kind of the cutting edge of some of this stuff that's never even been spoken of before. My goal is to systemize, demystify manifesting. Systemize and demystify manifesting. My YouTube channel, as you all know, is Divine Imagination by Joseph Alai. Everything that I teach is of experience. Everything that I teach is of experience. That's one of the things that I hear separates me. My stuff is unlike other people's stuff. And why is that? Because I'm only taking what I know for a fact, meaning I don't teach things that I don't know. And if I do, I'll mention that. I'm not sure about this. Every single thing that I teach has been through systematic testing of over 9 years, almost 10 years now. Question is, what do you wish were different? What do you wish is different? What do you want to be different? What do you wish right now? And it could be past, present, or future. Think about this in your mind. What do you wish is different? What do you wish were different? And I gotta say too, oh crap, that's not what I wanted to do. So, okay, so one of the rules, not right, I hate rules, but I have to say this because it makes everything go smooth and streamlined. I am imposing rules. The first rule is, please, while I am speaking, do not post in the chat. Do not answer. Second rule is, do not answer each other's questions. Do not post in the chat. It gets confusing for others. And not only that, when anyone posts in the chat, it pops up on my screen and it breaks my concentration. So if you see me getting distracted, it's probably because someone has messaged on the chat. I will stop for breaks. I will ask questions. I will stop for questions. So keep track of whatever it is that you want to ask me. And there is a Q&A thing. Let me click on stop share for a second. Does everybody see where there is a Q&A button? Raise your hand. Share, wrong button. Here it is. Perfect. So I will be stopping. There are multiple sections, as you can see right here. And in these sections, I will stop and answer questions. Okay. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, on questions, probably depending on how far we get or far along we get, because there's a lot of nuances and stuff to cover. I will be following this. You can get all this stuff online now on the dashboard. If you're signed up, you can go on and get that stuff. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I mean, I may go off this outline if I feel like I need to, but this will be the general reference of things. So the outline is, we're going to talk about the nature of experience, first of all, which is about past, present, and future. We're going to talk about also time and space. We're going to talk about how memories affect us. We're going to talk about how the events that have happened in the past affect us. We're going to talk about the new past, which is revision. We're going to talk about regrets. We're going to talk about the inventory. The inventory is the most powerful tool ever. Like, I think it's what changed my life. There's nothing that changed my life as much as the system that I'm going to go over in here. We're going to talk about analyzing. And just to be clear, the inventory is kind of going through our life and finding those events which in some way have affected us in a negative way generally, and then revising those on a systematic basis. And the inventory, we're going to do an analysis of that. And we're going to talk about modifying each of these events. So does, generally speaking, this sound clear? Raise your hand. Perfect. Last sip of coffee. Uh-oh. I'm glad you're all here. I think this workshop will probably be, thus far, the most important one. Literally. I'm not exaggerating. Okay. Your experience. What does this mean? What are you talking about, your experience? So your experience is shaped by your personal awareness. Your personal experience is shaped by your personal awareness. So all facets of your experience were created by you. All experiences, all pieces of your experience, everything good, bad, and different. In your awareness drew that in. So everything in your experience is yourself pushed out. So another word for yourself is your awareness. So there's a difference. I just want to make clear there's a difference between Joseph Alai and the awareness, which is aware of being Joseph Alai. It may sound abstract. Some of you may have heard me say that before. Some of you may have heard others say that before. But the truth is that there is an awareness. There is something that is aware of being Joseph Alai. There is something aware of being you. That is not your physical being. It's not your brain. There's something that is aware of being you, something aware of your thoughts, something aware of your feelings, moods, memories, attitudes, all these different things. That is the God of Scripture. So when they're referring to the God of Scripture, when I refer to the God of Scripture, that is what it is talking about. So any premise which is not that will fail. And you can always ask questions and there's never an answer for it, because the awareness within us supersedes and superimposes everything in the world. So gods or spirits or any of those things, stars, tarot, vibration, any of that stuff, all is within awareness and therefore is superseded by awareness. So I just want to make that clear. And that awareness is creative. And that creativity is what we do when we manifest. That is what creates our experience. So I didn't miss anything, did I? Oh, changing your imaginal acts and changing your memories will change others and change your entire experience. So in other words, imagination, which is another term for awareness, is the source of the phenomenon of life. Now, that's a quote Neville says, that the imagination is the source of the phenomenon of life. And so, but what he doesn't say is that imagination is a different word for awareness, except that imagination gives more of a better context that we can actually create, modify, and maneuver. But imagination is not just visualization. Imagination is any aspect of the mind which is essentially bringing forth or creating or forming something. So that could be thoughts, beliefs, memories, ideas, inner conversations, and on, right? Which is what it says in line number 2. So let's see. These independently are continuously growing a world on top of one another. So when I say independently, I'm talking about memories, beliefs, imagination, sorry, not imagination, visualizations, daydreams, moods, feelings. All of those are basically growing worlds, right? So our world is a continuous fluctuation, but building upon what happened earlier today, or what happened yesterday, or what happened a month ago, or what happened a year ago. These things exist within the mind, and therefore they are consistently manifesting outward. So in other words, and I'll get into this in the next section, but the state of the world, it doesn't go, how do I phrase this in a proper way? Linear time seems to be the cause of what is happening now. So all of the cumulative days, one after the next, all of those day after day after day are what normally in this society we consider as the cause of why today is today. Does that make sense, that statement? Raise your hand. That because of what happened yesterday, today is how today is. And there's nothing magic in that. That's just the way that the world works. Because I went to work yesterday, I got my paycheck today, for instance. Or because I got into an argument yesterday, today we're mad at each other, right? So everything is seemingly thought of as events building on top of each other, right? And that's what we're going to examine is it that way, or is it just everything exists now in the mind, and the mind is pushing out a perfect form dependent upon our memories? Are memories imaginal acts, or are they actually facts of things that happened a month ago? So, and this brings us into time and space, right? Now, I just want to be clear. Some of these sections are not so long, and the reason is because the theory comes the theory, but then when we get into the systematic stuff, that's where it's at. So time and space. This was a question that I already had asked. Past. So I want to ask you a question right now. So obviously you can remember, generally speaking, what happened yesterday. You can remember what happened a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, generally speaking, not perfectly, not pristine, not like pristinely, not like you have a video of every moment of your life, but generally speaking, you can remember these things. However, the past is looked at as an eternal place, or almost eternal, everything leading up until now, as if there's some space that holds all of those events. So if I could tell you now, like, do me a favor and just go to the past. Go to this infinite expanse called the past, where everything that ever happened exists. Step out of this present and go to the past. So you can't, right? You cannot. Just as like you cannot go into the future. And the reason is because there is only the eternal now. Everything is only existing now. Nothing has ever existed yesterday. There is no yesterday. There's only the sun rising and setting. I know this is really abstract, but there's a reason for me to say this stuff, right? Like I'm not a philosophy teacher. I don't care about philosophy. I'm just trying to poke holes in this theory for you, right? This is what I do. I poke holes in the common theories that people accept to be true, but then give you the truth. That's it, as per my own experience. So what would the implications be if there was only an eternal now? That would mean that everything is in its current state for some reason. Why is everything seeming to build on top of each other? Why, in your experience, does everything seem to build on top of each other? And the reason is very interesting, but it's provable, it's testable, which is all that I teach. Stuff that you can test. That's it. If you can't test it, I don't teach it. So let me ask you a question. This reality, the one that you live in, are you aware, and this is a personal question, you can raise your hand. Are you aware that your experience is completely shaped by you? Raise your hand. Okay. And you've at least heard this. You're at least trying to test this. Who is trying to prove this to themselves now? Perfect. Well, the truth is, now we say if there's no past, then what is there? There's only the now. And so the implication is that I guess put in a better way, the memories of the past are what make them true. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if that makes sense. Your memories of the past are what make them true and remain. How does that sound? Does that sound crazy or does that sound possible? Think about that. If that's true, then that means everything that you have assumed to be rock solid fact, everything that you feel is unchangeable, all of that only stays in its current state, and I mean virtually everything from what I've been able to prove to myself only exists in its current state because it exists that way in your mind. Now we look at the idea of an imaginal act. What is an imaginal act? In Scripture, when you pray, believe you have already received it and you shall, which means when you imagine after the end and you shall receive it, right? You shall receive it. So what is a memory? A memory has happened. It's something in your mind. You do believe you have already received it because you have. And so when you bring this forth when your memories exist in your mind, you are literally maintaining them in place. You are recreating over and over the thing that you have experienced, right? Now, experience is experience. So whatever you have experienced, that is true, right? But only experience, right? So when experience begins to trump what we believe, we must go with experience. So if I were to tell you, if you change a memory in your mind, then it will change the future based on the memory that you've just modified or created, then you would have to, if you saw that change the future, if you saw the outcome be just as the imaginal act that you have modified, the memory you have modified, then you can go to prove to yourself that truly there is no past. It only exists in your mind. So I know it sounds insane. To me, this is what drove me away from Neville Goddard. I stumbled upon him. Someone told me to revise. I literally said, F you. And I abandoned Neville for a while because I thought this was so insane. But eventually, when my hands were tied and my back was against the wall, I was forced in a position where I had to do this or die, literally. And it paid off big time. So just to summarize this section, it's basically time is only a construct of the mind, right? And a good one at that. There's use for that. But as a manifester, as someone who has creative control, we can prove that this construct is just a construct. It's not the fact. The fact is that there is no past. There is only the now. There's only the now. So when you jump into your imagination and you modify a memory, you will watch how you will plant that seed of a modified memory, and then the future will begin to change based on that new memory. I will. And just to be clear, let me just see what I have here. Changing your imaginal acts will change your experience and change others. And that's with memories as well. So I'll take some questions on that, actually. Make sure you ask it in the Q&A, please. Okay, so Q&A. Questions on that. I know this is not into action yet, but nevertheless, questions. Go right ahead. How can I revise without bringing up the old negative feelings? When I revise an argument, I find I start to have the negative feelings I had at the time of the argument, and the negative feelings like resentment I've had since the fight. I have tried adding to my daily list things like I am at peace with Jane, and I no longer feel angered towards Jane, but it is still an issue. Suggestions. I'm going to go into more of how to take care of these. This isn't even really an edge case. This is a common case. We're going to go into the details. I just want to talk about generally the idea of time and your experience. And we will get to this question, trust you me. I'm glad you like this, Victoria. Let's say we revise on something with an SP or someone we have a crush on. Wouldn't that mess with the middle in some way? I mean, technically, it's before the middle. So not necessarily, but it also depends upon the way from which you're going about it. So we'll talk about this a little bit, but it really depends on the case, right? The problem with the middle is that you can plant seeds that either A, don't matter, or B, from a manipulative standpoint, it can crash and tangle things up. But generally speaking, you can, like, I revise incidents that cause me resentment and pain, and it works tremendously well. How to know what you should revise. We will go into this. Can you modify an event you know has affected you, but you don't have a memory of? I know the event happened and how it affected me, but I have no memory of it. Yes, you can revise that. That's a good question. How can we revise something that was traumatic? It brings up anxiety. So some of these techniques, this is just a forewarning. If you have, and I'll go into this as we go into this, some things you may want to hold off on unless you're with a therapist, because some of these things we will want to bring up. But we will eventually, in most cases, need to feel. We cannot suppress. So that's a big part that's going to come up in this. I actually did not include a section on that, but I think it might be a good time for me to bring that up. Suppression is the cause of disease, and or dis-ease, but disease per se in all dimensions, because we can never actually hide from what we're thinking. If you think about it, whatever we suppress is subconscious. What creates the subconscious? So inevitably, either we want to deal with the problem as soon as we can, but in a healthy way. We can't run and hide from it, or it will continuously manifest in adverse ways in our life, at this pain, right? And also, our life begins to take form in a direction specifically to prevent us from feeling this pain. So our whole life, in effect, begins to turn towards an alternate path just to avoid this one blip on the eternal now. It's a huge leap. How do you discipline yourself to accept this reality? Through testing it, right? Testing it, proving it to yourself, showing, because the thing is that your eternal self, the God within, this is just business as usual. I mean, God is eternal, and that's who you truly are. Like, you really are the God of Scripture. the I am. And so we don't have to really accept anything. We just have to test it, right? So one of the things, and I'll just say this again, I will never teach anything and tell you to take my word on it. Okay, that's where religion starts. That's when people, that's what blind, I don't believe in blind faith. Don't believe in it. You can prove it to yourself very simply, and then you can start to adopt it. That's what I did. Is it enough to just see your current reality? All the things, what you don't like about it, see the new things and step into that versus going back to an isolated event, almost like shedding an old skin. No idea. I think in scripture it's called dying to the old man, or what's the verse? It's like, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove that is perfect and good will of God, or something like that. And it's talking about, or there's the word metanoia, which is repent, but repent does not mean regret. Repent means to have a radical change of mind. And to an extent, yes, this is possible. But if you're seeing remnants of repetitive failures or hurts that keep happening over and over, you're going to want to go back and revise some things, probably. What about revising a continual childhood issue? Not just one incident, but just a way of life growing up. I think a lot of people, and this is, I mean, I could speak for myself. I've had parent childhood issues. There are ways to kind of overarch. Like if you have literally a solid event going through and through, generally what I find is that there are cornerstones, right? There are marks that you remember, right? The ones that you remember the most are the ones that I would modify. Here's the thing about revision. I was on the Facebook group earlier, which I've finally started being active in again. And someone, what was it? It was something about revision. Oh, this is what it was. Someone was asking, well, how am I supposed to revise thousands of events? Revision, just like manifesting, is not for people who want it. It's not for people who need it. It's for people who do it. So depending on how bad you want change, depending on how bad you want what you want, depending on how free you want to be, you're going to put that effort in proportion to that desire. Last question. How does this present change? How does this present change? The present changes the same way as manifesting. It generally takes place the same way and same style that manifesting with imagination takes place. Okay. So let's get back to action. We're going to start getting into some of the nitty-gritty stuff. Guys, listen, this is really important, what I'm about to say. This stuff is literally the answer to fixing. I don't know about you, but fixing yourself. I don't know about you, but I know when I was younger, I always used to wonder, like I always wanted to know who to be. I wanted to know the right thing to do. I wanted to know what I was doing wrong. I wanted to be someone else in a sense. Like I wanted to be more right. I wished I knew the right way, but I couldn't get all the answers. And I'm talking about when I was younger, right? The thing is as we get older, it becomes harder to change ourselves. So finally we become this person, and then we start to realize everything that was wrong with our childhood or what have you. And then we try to make changes, but it becomes more difficult to make the changes because our brain is set. Revision is the solution for that. Revision is the solution for that. So all the events, character defects, beliefs, fears, resentments, attitudes, beliefs, all of those things are formed by the past, right? So we imagine for the future, but even the way that our manifestations come is based on what we believe. So the bridge of incidence, and I've said this before, but the bridge of incidence is paved by, created by, the materials of which the bridge of incidence comes is shaped by our memories, attitudes, beliefs, perceptions, ideas, resentments. All these things together have shaped who we are. And when we manifest, things come through that way. So this is the key to change the way that everything happens. Our beliefs, our limitations, all of these things, even our parents telling us things like limitations, like be careful, save your money, money's hard to get, go to college, get a job, you're not good enough. Whatever it is that anyone told us, all of those things shaped who we are. This is the key to that. Does that make sense? Raise your hand. Okay. Hopping back in. First of all, does anyone not understand that? Okay. Let's go back to sharing now. Revision. Revision. As defined, revision is the modification of the past from which that modification of the past will modify the future. That doesn't make sense, but I wrote. Revision is when we modify the past in our imagination, because that is the only place that it exists, in our awareness, right? And then the future will be modified. So I think it'd be a good time. I'm going to try to do this again. I'll try to do this every single time, but there's a slight exercise to prove that everything exists in our awareness. Everything that we have ever experienced comes through the form of senses, right? Senses, and generally emotions. Senses, emotions, everything we see, taste, touch, hear, smell, that's all through our senses, right? And our senses are all known. We know we're aware of those. We are aware of those senses. Generally speaking, we can never go out, not even generally, literally speaking, we can never go beyond our senses. We can never be aware of something that we're not aware of. And so therefore, you could say that we have no proof that anything exists outside of our senses. Because if you removed the senses, you would never experience the thing external. So if you close your eyes, you can't see the wall or the computer or the phone in front of you. So what does this mean? Why am I saying this? That means that we can never go outside of our perception. And all of our perception that we experience things by is known. And so therefore, everything is known. And what's known is what we are aware of. And so our world all exists within our awareness. Now, scripture says that awareness is God. If awareness is God, then that means that we should be able to create like God. But we can. That's what we do. Awareness is creative. And so when we bring into our imagination awareness of the thing that we want, you can prove then that you're God because you will see the results on the screen of space. So modifying the past inside our awareness will modify the external, which there is no external because we can never go outside of our senses. We only know it's in our awareness. But the external, the side effect world, revision is the modification of awareness of the past, and the results will be shown to us, manifested in this external world. Does that make sense? I know the awareness thing is a little confusing. It's not something generally that can be known by the ego mind. It can only kind of be, you can get the gist of it like that. Like you could probably agree with what I'm saying. You can never know something outside of your senses, ever. Who agrees with that statement? I can never experience something that I haven't sensed in some way. Even if you're watching something on a TV, you still are watching it, right? You can never experience anything. Therefore, and all of those things, your senses are known, right? You know that you're seeing them, right? Raise your hand if you know that. Try to be aware of something that you don't know. You can't. Literally. We don't have time to do the exercises now, but eventually what you'll find is that everything only exists in your awareness, and you can never prove that something exists outside of your awareness. And this is what it says in scripture, but it says that this awareness is God. And so when we modify when we use the awareness that is where all this is created in, we can therefore create like God, and we can. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there as a kind of a premise. I'm going to do a meditation one of these days with this, and it will teach you and show you literally, right? The idea, let me ask you this question, okay? This is as an aside. The idea that we are God, right? So if I said, I am God, or you are God, to you, is this something that you can actually prove? Or is this something, who can prove it? That's what I want to know. Or is it something, the latter part of the question is, or is this something that you're told and you just believe? So who can prove it? Raise your hand. Okay. And who believes it instead? Like you can choose one or the other. Perfect. Thank you for telling me that. I will do a meditation. I'll help you prove to yourself that you are God. Okay. So the revised events can help with beliefs. How can revised events help with beliefs? Well, the thing is that a lot of our beliefs, as I mentioned before, that through childhood, through heartache, through pain, suffering, loss, good things too, winning things, being lucky, whatever it is, or just being told by someone you trust. These will shape your beliefs, these events, right? Who can agree that your beliefs on how the world works are shaped by your conclusions made from events? Raise your hand if you can say that your beliefs are shaped by your conclusions of events. Perfect. So when we change those events, if we actually do change those events, like take for example, literally you can change the event, would that not change your belief? Will it change your belief? Can you agree that if an event created a belief, then you can change the event and it will change the belief? Raise your hand if that makes sense. Perfect. So when you imagine an alternate ending to whatever it is that you want, or inject a new scene, you will in effect be able to change your beliefs, change outcomes, change experiences, the whole nine. The key is to select a revised event and imagine it in any which way. Beliefs, we just went over this, our memories, our past events, all of these things create our reality. Sometimes we must change the past event to change the belief. Yes, we just talked about this. Belief are created due to past events. Yes, our memories are past events. Yes. So another premise, I know this may sound obvious, but as a premise here, our memories are what we would consider the past. Does that make sense? Or and the opposite of that, or like the latter, or something different, rather, the contrary would be the past is an actual place where things exist, right? So in contrary to that, and what we're leaning towards and what we're trying to prove here is that the past only exists in our memories and others' memories, for instance. All of these create our reality. The sum total, now here's the interesting thing, and this is what's very important to understand, is that all of these things exist only right now. So it's like having, say you have a phone and it's filled with every event that you've ever lived in ever. But say you can pick up this phone and click and scroll and go to any date that you want. It still only exists right now, right? Literally, because the phone is here. You're not actually going to that place in time in the past. You're looking at an event like a picture. This is what a memory is. Does that make sense? It's your memory of the event. It's your perception of the event. So one last thing, just to clarify this to you. Any event that you have ever experienced, you're not actually experiencing the true event. You are experiencing, and this is, I'm talking about even right now, you're not actually experiencing 100% the true event. You are experiencing that event filtered through your perception. Does that make sense? In other words, my mind allegedly exists behind these eyes, right? And therefore I see the screen and the camera based on what I'm seeing, you know, behind my eyes and my ears, right? And my everything. It's existing within my awareness. So for instance, I can never experience this from out here, right? It's always going through here, which is connected to my mind, which is where everything is filtering through. So I'm never experiencing the pure experience. I'm experiencing everything behind my perception. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So the idea behind that is, again, no one knows the same thing. Like if we're both looking at the same event, both of us are going to have a different experience because it's behind different perceptions, right? But everything still only exists right now. Just like the phone, right? Just like the phone is a lens looking outward. It's not actually taking a snapshot of reality. It's not actually grabbing reality and storing it in the phone. It's storing its own virtual picture of the phone. And that's kind of what our perception is like. So revision, in effect, is kind of like going in and saying, okay, there's nothing that exists in the past. It only exists on this phone. And so if I modify what's on this phone, that's the truth. That's the new truth. Does that make sense? I know I'm beating the dead horse here, but these are very abstract ideas. All right. Thank you. So what do we want to revise? This is what we can do, and this is going to answer some of the questions that you had earlier. We can modify events that happened that we wished were different, so therefore modifying negative events. We can add on to events. We can add an event that did not exist after a series of events, right? To change an ending, to change a sum total ending. Or we can inject an event which never existed and you never even thought of having it had existed back when it happened. In effect, it's like an imaginal act, altogether purely new, nothing to do with anything else. So again, I'll repeat that. You can modify the negative events. You can modify getting fired. You can modify getting in an argument, all those things. Or you can add an event, add on to the event. So you take that event and then you add a little piece onto it, right? So you add to the end. You add to the end, right? Does that make sense? So you take an event, you don't like it, well, here it is, and then you add another 4 seconds onto it. Now we have adding an event after a series of events, which in effect talks about those where there's like 100 different events that you're like, oh my God, how do I revise all these? You can, in effect, take those 100 events, whatever, but then add a different alternate ending to the end, which says that all of these were false or falsely perceived. And then the final one is injecting a brand new event. Now, this is something I know this has never been heard anywhere else probably. But the idea is, I think I've shared this on my channel, but for instance, I imagined that I had gone and invested in Google. I imagined that I invested a small amount in Google like 20 years ago. Because I remember when I was in probably 10th grade. So this is a while ago, probably 15 years ago, 13 years ago. I imagined, because I checked on Google and I saw Google, it was like $10 for something. And I imagined a couple of years ago that I had invested in it back then in 2005 or something like that. And then I just let it go. And then what happened was I ended up getting a new bonus structure at work, which would have accounted for $10,000, which would have been the imaginal act that I had done to fakely invest in the past. So injecting an event which never existed. So first of all, does all that kind of make sense? Does everyone get when I say adding an event to the series after of events? So if you have 100 events, you add another one after to negate the 100 that happened. I'll go into this more. Okay. So revision, modification. Now, again, I'm going to actually go into the systematic way to do this. But right now, it's still more about the methodology or the technique or how or what to use it on. So revision, modification. So you can revise what someone said by imagining that they said something different. You can modify what something did by imagining that their action was different. In effect, I'm going to be saying the same thing because there's very slight differences here, but something hurtful, anything hurtful. You can always revise any event, but the idea is we don't have to technically forget the old event because it's just the same as creating beliefs. When we are creating assumptions, it's not like we're going out of our way to forget the old one. We are just creating the new one. And the new one always, every time, superimposes the old one and takes effect. Does that make sense? We don't have to forget the old. We just have to create the new and imagine it. Okay. And don't worry, I'll get to questions soon. Addition, right? So this is, I think, where did I say this? Not here. Where'd it go? Adding on to events or adding after events. So addition is essentially, these are the options here, essentially. Now, this is not hard, fast rules, but if there are too many events to remember, then or revise, you can just go and add one after the end, as long as they're not haunting you. If you have events specifically that are haunting you, that's when you're going to want to go in and revise those. But if you generally remember things and you remember, vague essences of memories and you have a ton of them, you can go in and just add one to the end. If you can't properly revise the scene without it provoking anxiety or pain, that's another option, is to try. You can attempt to just simply add something after the end. So for instance, you break up with someone, right? You broke up with someone or you lost a lot of money. That event where you were scammed, that event where you were hurt, that event where you were crushed. Instead, if you try and you cannot do this, something you can do is add an event shortly after, whether it be the same night, the same day, or the next day, wherein you were proven that actually that wasn't true. That although those events took place yesterday, the outcome finally was how you wanted it to be. Does that make sense? You break up with someone, but then the next day, you know what? I think maybe we'll reconsider breaking up. Let's just take a little break, or like, instead of I never want to see you again, or instead of whatever it is, you can, if it's very painful, you can try to add to the end. Now, here's the thing. If you cannot, If you literally cannot, I would never tell you to do something that you shouldn't do. So do not experience things that you aren't ready to experience. Or if you do it with a trained professional. Okay, that's my disclaimer, but I mean that. I've done that before. Okay. And then injection, and I've described this a little bit before, but to insert scenes which never happened. And generally, the difference between regular revision and injection is revision is usually modifying hurtful events that happened, but in a different way, whereas injection is literally creating a new event out of thin air and putting it in somewhere. Does everyone understand the difference between regular revision and injection? Okay, who's got a question on revision versus injection? Please ask it first before we get into other ones. I made a fake investment to make 10K. Yes, this is all fake. Holy shit, I've never thought of 2 to 4. I wonder which ones you're talking about. You and I might have completely different memories of the same event. If I was trying to get back together with you, how do I change your perception of what happened? You never concern what anyone else is doing, ever. You only concern with your imagination. You are the operant power, not them. So whatever you imagine, they will, it doesn't change their memory, but they will become the outcome that you have imagined, Beth. But does everyone, I want to know now, because this injection has never been spoken of before. Does everyone get what I'm saying? So there's no objective reality. That's a very vague question. The truth is that everything exists within awareness. So from the human point of view, there is objective awareness. Objective reality. But from the standpoint of awareness, everything is just awareness. It's all one thing, which is called awareness. So the 10K materialized. I'm a bit confused. So you can inject events to potentially benefit in some form in the present? Yes, that is what revision is. Revision means you can modify, inject, alter events in the past, and therefore reap the rewards today. That is what revision is. It's the same miraculous power as manifesting, and it really shatters. And again, a lot of the things that I say, and I know this, you guys are mainly all on the same page, but a lot of the people that hear me it strikes the ego, not the ego like, oh, I'm big and bad, but the ego protects beliefs, right? The things that I say shatter traditional, either law of attraction or whatever your belief was, like my belief was, like all this crazy stuff. It shatters all that stuff. Revision is altering the past. That's exactly what it is. And so with me investing in the past, what happened was I faked that. That was an imaginal act, just like imagining in the future is. And then the events must fulfill to give you what you've imagined. Thank you, Amber. Another example of injection would be maybe that maybe you have won some award, or you have been recognized by someone, right? Something that never happened that you wished would happen, essentially. And events will change based on that fact to give you the outcome of what you've imagined for. So instead of going into a fight and changing what was said, I can imagine them calling the next day and saying, sorry, let's be friends. So I would consider that more of just for basic revision. I would consider that, but although it's the same premise, you're injecting a scene that never existed. When I say injection, the definition that I would like to kind of encompass around it is that it is unrelated to anything that has ever happened before. Whereas revision, you're revising either some event or you're revising some event or some change event, some chain of events. Whereas injection is kind of a standalone thing that is in no way related to anything else that's ever happened. So do I inject in the past? So we always are. If you think about it, our memories are never identical to the experience that we've had. So in essence, we are always changing with our dynamic mind the future because we're always changing the past. What we're doing with revision, and I just want to make an analog here. The same way that we do that with revision, that's what we're doing with our imagination all day long. We are inadvertently imagining things all day long and therefore creating a dynamic future. So the difference between just naturally doing this and deliberately doing this is we are going to more of an extreme with our modification, knowing that we are going to, in effect, change the outcome of the world, of our experience, rather. So I hope that makes sense. Injection, I would probably think of financial matters. I would probably, like me personally, I think it will vary from person to person. My business has always been my thing since I was a kid. 3 years old, I've wanted to have a business. So that's where I generally go, is business. Like, okay, I invested here, and it's the same thing as imagining, right? Whereas I have to imagine it in a way that I'm going to feel comfortable in imagining it, right? So the reason that I would have invested only a few $100s back then instead of 10 million is because that's unbelievable to me, right? Not that I need to believe it, but I can't even imagine it properly without me feeling like a fraud. So I generally, and this is even me talking, I always imagine based on what is believable to me. And as I grow bigger and better and stronger in my manifesting abilities, I allow them to grow bigger and stronger. Is the God within the same as an inner God? Is that the same as I am? I want clarity on this. It would have to probably be an entire workshop on this, which maybe I'll just do one of these days, whatever, like as a free workshop. But the I am is not an inner God. It is the inner God. So there is only one God. There's only one Lord. There's only one God. And so that means that the God in me is literally the exact same awareness that is in you. Me, you, Regina, Jennifer, Kimberly. We all have the same God within. We're just aware of different things right now. So you could say it is an inner God, although because we are aware of this whole thing, all of this around us, technically this am inside awareness, opposed to awareness being inside here. Since I'm aware of all this all I am inside of. I know it's a little abstract. I hope you get that. I don't expect anyone to really get that fully. But as you rewind this later and watch it, I think it might make more sense. Does Scripture have any examples of revision? I think Lazarus is an example of revision, and I think in Job there's some examples of revision. But in effect, there's no like technically speaking in Scripture, there's nothing that has to do with the future either, nor the past. It's just whatever you want, imagine it, you know. And also in essence, like even Jesus it says like turn up thine eyes and the field is ripe with fruit or whatever. He's essentially changing what exists now into fruit bearing stuff. So it's really all over. It's all one and the same thing. It's just an aspect that's overlooked generally. Hey, Joseph, my question is about revising several events. Let's say I revise event B and then later I go to the event on the timeline and revise event A. How will A and B impact each other? Or would it be better to just inject an event in C to eliminate A and B together? I get what you're saying, I think. So this is the interesting thing that you will find about revision. Modifying a single event generally has a single outcome. Modifying a single event generally has a single outcome. And it eludes and proves the idea that everything is a seed that grows its own individual flower. So you change one event, you think that it's going to change the entire world, but what you'll find is, and you will have to prove this to yourself because all I'm doing is giving you speculation right now, is that you modify something and maybe one or two things are changed by it, which is actually really safe and really secure. And it really gives a better or a deeper breadth of understanding as to how manifestations work. So, but anyway, to answer your question, the idea is if you are coming up continuously with memories, see the problem is that memories create. So if you are imagining memories by accident, you will create them. So if you add C to just override A and B, but you're still popping up with A and B and you're just suppressing it or repressing it, you're going to have issues. And that's when you're going to want to go in and revise both of them. But again, I can't be sure about A and B and how A is going to affect B because you don't know if they're going to be connected to each other. So the best way to do this is to literally revise every single event ever. And that's what we're about to get into right now. I'm glad this all worked. This is actually a really important question right here, and then I'm going to move on, is if you modify an event that happened with another person, is the other person's memory modified? Generally speaking, no. What will happen is the person will still remember, but okay, so you take for an example, I did this with my uncle. Me and him did not leave on good terms. And I saw him at my brother's funeral, but after that, I did not speak to him for years. What ended up happening was I imagined us having a conversation different than the one that we had. And what ended up happening was the next day, my uncle messaged me, and I hadn't talked to him about 6 years. So first of all, it worked. And what happens is although the person remembers everything that happened, no matter what they were feeling, thinking, whatever, they become the outcome of what you've imagined. Does that make sense? It's very important. Does anyone not understand that concept? If I revise an event that you are in, right? Say I got into an argument with someone, like my uncle, and then I modify it in my mind. My uncle, I modified to be a happy conversation. My uncle showed up on Facebook. He found me. I hadn't talked to him in years. He messaged me, and we carried on a conversation which was commensurate or equal to the revised conversation. But I imagined the revised conversation happening 6 years ago. But today he shows up in my life and he messages me the same way that I imagined him doing it 6 years ago. But did he forget the conversation that we had? No, but it doesn't matter the outcome or feeling that he had is now changed. His personality changed. Something gave him an impulse. This is how it works. The person will get impulses to convince them to become a different style of person. So he no longer carried the resentment or pain or whatever it was. Suddenly, whatever reasoning went through his mind, and he became the person that I had imagined. Does that make sense? Very important concept. Okay. And if you don't understand, we'll just keep going. Scenes. What have I got here? Most of us don't have to think twice about the negative things that have happened, right? Spotting the problem is half the battle. We already know what happened most of the time. And once we know the issues, that's when we can take them through the system and rewrite them. So now we're going to get into the action part, right? I want to give you guys with something extremely concrete. This will change your life. If you do this, your life will literally change. There's nothing more important than this process. So let's see what we got here. Any scene. So you think now there are some things which have greater impact on us than others, right? So what happens when we change them? They alter the future, but not to an extreme extent. And that's what I was alluding to before when I said that each seed you will find, each revision will have generally one plant. So modifying one event generally won't modify 100, which is amazing. Really it is. And that's safe. And we do this no matter what, right? We're doing this inadvertently all day long before we knew how to manifest. So I'm guessing by speculation that that's how it's set up so that we can't make huge modifications to this experience. So what's the process? So first of all, the idea, we take a scene, right? So you have something that you wished happened differently. You have something that you wished happened differently. You contemplate, first of all, what outcome you wished had happened, right? What do you want? Or what did you want? But something happened and it wasn't that, right? Or something happened which then didn't lead to that. So what do? You modify the event. Generally, what we're going to do literally is write them down, right? A systematic approach to revising our experience, which will eventually free us up and change our entire life. So we modify the event. We write down an alternate ending to the event. Now, I want to make something very clear here. The number one approach that you want to take is directly modifying the scene. That is number one, priority number one. Directly modify the scene itself. And you will get a very good indication if you attempt to do this. If you are in pain or fearful or suffering or any of those things, then generally speaking, these are absolutely the perfect ones to revise. If you have extremely supercharged emotions attached to an event, then you have found the correct scene. Because if you do not remove the charge from this and modify the scene, then that scene charged with emotion will perpetuate and continue to happen over and over and over. And not only that, but the world will continuously begin to operate in that way. You will keep experiencing identical things happening in your world, and it's a problem. Does that make sense? The supercharged painful events are the most important ones to revise, because otherwise there's two things happening generally. The first thing is that we're suppressing or repressing, which only leads to disease or inadvertent manifestations, right? You think about it. Everything in our subconscious continuously creates, whether we consciously bring it into our mind or not, which is how assumptions work. Assumptions are we just write down a belief, we forget about it. Well, it went into the back of our mind, and now it's going to continuously change the way the world works. In that same way, our repressed memories that are supercharged or charged with emotion, or even without emotion, are going to continuously transform the world. Now, here's the beautiful thing. Our beliefs, which are shaped by these bad events, right? Say we modify this event. Say you have a belief. You're like, this belief I know came from this event. I'm going to modify this belief. Am I in charge now of trying to change my belief? So I've modified the event, which has created this belief. Is it my responsibility to now change the belief? Yes or no? Raise your hand if it's yes. Raise your hand if it's no. We had about 50-50 there. Okay, so the answer is if we change that event which had caused the belief, so say I revise the event which had caused the belief, I am not responsible for changing the belief. If I revise the scene which had caused the belief, then that is the same thing as doing an imaginal act to remove the belief. And so I'm not responsible in how the imaginal act comes. I'm not responsible for making it come. All I have to do is imagine it and it will come. So what happens with beliefs is that the universe, through God obligates the universe to force you to believe the new belief. So if something made me depressed and I modify that scene to make it something happy, it's now God's job to convince you of the new belief. Does that make sense? Raise your hand. Then this is how assumptions work. This is how beliefs in general work. If we're creating a new belief, all we need to, this is how manifestations work. All we need to do is take the action and then God provides the increase. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So we write down the modified scene in a way that takes either the edge off, in the sense of, okay, so this is an important concept as well. And I'm going to start to try to get through this a little bit quicker now because I've been dwelling a lot on intricate details. I know this is important though. I'm not saying it's unimportant. We're going to move forward with the action part. So listen, generally speaking, if we can revise the scene completely and have a satisfactory feeling in our chest or heart or soul or whatever the hell you want to call it, when you do this without feeling like a liar, then that's fine, right? You want to find a medium, some scene that's not going to make you feel like a liar, right? So even if it means that, so say for instance, someone broke up with you. Say for instance, you lost a whole lot of money. Instead of imagining now that you just have this load of money and that it never happened, you can modify, or that you never broke up and you're together now, right? And you can do this if you can feel it properly. But some people, and sometimes, and I've even been here where I just feel like it's a complete bunch of bullshit. And so what I could do is modify the event slightly but severely enough to lessen the blow of the outcome and make it aimed toward the direction of what I want. So for instance, instead of me getting broken up with and them saying to me, it's over, it could be, let's just take like a couple days, let's just take a little break, right? Or whatever, there's a huge difference between saying I'm done with you, screw you, and let's just take like a few days apart, right? Huge difference. So if you can't revise it to a 180 degree opposite, then go to a degree near that. And then an event, just to be clear, because I don't know if I added this in here, an event after a series of events could be something that just negates the whole thing. So if I argue with someone continuously, I could, and again, this is case by case basis, right? Because priority number one is to revise every single scene, right? Priority number two would be to, if you can't really hit every scene, or if you can't remember every scene, then to go after all of those events. This is generally when there's numerous events, and create an event that negates the whole thing. So if I had a terrible childhood and there was 4,000 events that proved it, and it was all because of my father, then perhaps what I would do is go after all the end, like 17 years old or 18 years old, and imagine I'm having a conversation with someone about how my childhood was perfect. My father is just like the nicest person in the world, you know. This works best with the events that aren't extremely sharp, right? It's still your responsibility to modify specific events. You will find the results to be ultra rewarding. And you would start from the very beginning of the events that you can remember, generally speaking. Or you can go opposite, depending on what makes sense to you, because sometimes events only take place in a, how do I say it? Like, in a linear fashion, other times not. So first of all, does anyone have questions on that? I'm not going to take too much time because I don't want to keep everyone here who wants to go to bed or needs to go to work. I'm going to get through this stuff, but are there any questions important related to these topics that I just covered right now? How can we revise something that we wish we never saw and heard? Images and sounds are already in my awareness. So is it possible to erase them or transform them? You're going to want to transform them in some way. You're going to want to reframe them different meaning. And that's what I mean by modifying, because forgetting completely isn't really an option generally, right? Because subconsciously it's there. We want to superimpose or overwrite it. Do you write down the before event that needs to be changed or just write down the modified version? So we're going to get into all that right now. But the answer is I would, depending on the circumstances, we're going to go through a full inventory. We're going to go through a systematic way to do this where we're going to write down everything. Everything. If I had an argument with someone who I'm in good terms with, can I still revise it? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just change the event or add it or whatever. Add to it. So the question comes, is the goal to completely replace the memory? So just like here's the thing. It's just like beliefs, right? Assumptions. When we, and I hope you guys have been making the lists and doing the assumptions, right? All of this really depends upon your action, right? None of this can be thought. It needs to be done, right? And that's what the difference is in the Bible. It says drinking wine and not water is actually putting it to the test. So when you create a new assumption and you watch the effects happen in reality, you don't necessarily forget that you used to be insecure. You'll still remember that, but the new one takes place that you are now a secure, confident person. In that same way, if you take that action to imagine the revised scene to the best of your ability, and you can remove the supercharged energy from the memory, which you can do, I always give this technique, but if there's a memory that has a lot of pain, I bring it into my mind's eye and I cut off the thought process from it and allow the feeling to sit within my being, and it will vanish, it will evaporate. But I have to meet it dead on. Now, this is something, like I said, if you can't deal with it, this is when like a psychologist or a therapist comes in. You don't want to go off the deep end, right? This is something I've gone off the deep end before. I couldn't deal with it. Certain things, like very few events, I literally could not face. But the ones that even I had a hard time facing, if I allow it to sit in my stomach, usually for me, it's in my chest, there's a pain, like a really discomfortable, uncomfortable pain. Not a pain like stabbing, but like, no, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to think about this. If I can meet it dead on and remove the thought process from it after bringing it up and allowing it to sit wherever the feeling is, the feeling will dissolve. And you do this enough times that memory will lose the feeling attached to it. But that comes with you must have the intention in mind to actually face it and to have the removal of that feeling to it. You can also imagine that your bad memories have had all the feelings removed from them. And then eventually, in a natural way, that's what will happen. Are I remember when statements a part of revision? No, that's actually a manifesting technique, a general manifesting technique. I remember when is like me saying, I remember when I didn't have $1 billion, right? I'm not revising anything per se. It's more of like going into the future and imagining back when I did not have $1 billion, like, and saying now that I did. It's a good question. How do you remove the thought? I'm not sure of your question. Here's a good question. So I understand going to the root and revising. I know where my relationship patterns come from. Some events are super traumatic. I have been through enough self-work to revise. However, those events, I think, brought me to this level of awareness. In revising the events, it wouldn't disrupt current awareness, only enhance it, right? Good question, but think about that question again. It brought you to here as well. Everything is a manifestation. Everything is perfect. If you don't believe that, prove it to yourself. Literally every event is a manifestation. So therefore you could say that the pain in your life brought you to this level of awareness. And it also brought you to this event right now where I am telling you to revise. So this is perfect as well. So in effect, it could have been that pain that brought you to this awareness. And now this awareness can stand on its own. So you remove the pain. Right? This is my experience. So it's not going, and again, like I said, there's generally only one shoot from each seed that grows. So you're basically uprooting something and then something after it will be removed. Okay. How do you cut off the thought while sitting there and feeling the emotion? By literally, so first you bring the memory in, right? You bring this bad memory in, you hold it there. It starts to bring the uncomfortable feeling in. Now you face it dead on. There's the feeling, there's the memory, and now remove the memory. Now you're just left with that uncomfortable feeling, right? And then you let the feeling sink in. It's just like stopping thinking about it. Okay, we're going to carry on. Inventory. This is, now that we've gone over what revision is and how to do it, I'm going to talk to you about the inventory, which changed my life. So some of this comes from a 12-step program. I'm saying the idea of it came from there. This is something that I've basically created out of a bare necessity, right? I had known about revision, but I was dying. I was dying of addiction, literally dying. All of my friends were dead. I was dying. No one thought I was going to make it. And so my final chance was to take a full inventory of all of the past events that were traumatic and revise them, right? Does that make sense? Raise your hand. So I'm gonna tell you now where I was. This is not an exaggeration. I did not have a place of my own. I had zero money, negative money. I was in debt. I wanted to die. I was addicted to drugs, literally physically dependent to the point where if I didn't have it, I would be physically sick. I had spent a lot of time in institutions, in and out. I'd been in jail. All my friends were dead. All my friends were dying. I was dying. And not a lot of other things that suicidal ideations, extreme depression, no friends, nothing like that. So that was literally the state that I was in. Nothing. Indigent, broke, heartbroken, no friends, dope sick, addicted. Basically, someone that you would see that you just feel sorry for. The curtains were closing. Zero hope. I'd been to over 17 detoxes and I think another 16 rehabs. Spent over a year in treatment over the span of 9 years. So it was a special type of hell and insanity where I literally had zero control. And this process is what brought me to where I am now, literally. So talk about proof and experience, the only thing that changed was this. This was the solvent. This was the thing this was the solution. So by analyzing the past, we can find the problems that keep repeating. We can find the beliefs that are interfering and the perceptions which are causing us resentments, and we can remove resentment. So let's see what we got here. Resentments is anger relived, right? Resentment is anger relived. It's reliving anger. When we relive something, we recreate it. And so in effect, a cycle begins as soon as we get a resentment, right? You know, some people, you can probably think of a person, and it may even be yourself, like it was me. I was very resentful, right? You can probably think of someone who's very resentful. What happens is things continue to happen based on your memories, especially charged memories with emotion. So resentments are a killer, literally. I believe that resentment actually causes disease. It causes a lot of bad stuff. So every time, like I said, we relive a memory, a seed is planted. Not only that, but the problem that happened is kept in place. If we take the power away, we can remove the resentment. If we take that charge away, we can remove the resentment. And if we can remove the resentment, we can be free to create. So after I had done my inventory, which is the process that I'm literally now taking you through, everything changed. That's when dimensions started bleeding one into another. That's when I started having all these mystical experiences. That's when my manifestations grew, right? I was not always like this. I was not always gifted at manifesting. I was not always good at manifesting. This was a process that I had learned and experienced, right? This is not something I read in a book. This is not something that someone told me. I didn't watch a lecture. I didn't go to see Abraham Hicks live. In fact, everything that I teach is all my experience. What happened in the end was I was watching all these teachers, Abraham Hicks, Pam Grout, Napoleon Hill, Joe Dispenza, all these people. But the problem was The problem is they were telling me how manifesting works, but my experience proved that what they were telling me was wrong, right? So what I hear from a lot of people is that they find someone and they resonate with someone, and then they use their stuff, right? For me, it was different. For me, it was the opposite. For me, it was I had my experiences, but everyone was saying things contrary to the experiences, right? And that's why you'll find these teachings, you'll have a lot of success in what I teach, because most of teachings are taught through tradition, right? Someone teaches something, right? They'll teach two things, right? Say, this one works. And so the student says both of them are true, right? And so that's what you'll find all across law of attraction teachers, YouTubers, right? The truth of the matter is that our awareness is creating everything, right? There's not certain things that create and certain things that don't create. I'm sorry, there's not certain things that are created and certain things that you have not created. You have created your whole experience. It's also not just feeling that creates, right? This is another common misconception, but it's based on a false premise, which is vibration, and that feeling is a vibration. The true premise is that our entire awareness is creative. That means our memories, moods, feelings, imaginal acts, visualizations, inner conversations, whatever else is number 7, on and on and on and on and on. Those, every independent, individual, non-combined aspect, imaginal senses, I probably said that. Every individual, independent, non-combined aspect or facet of your awareness, of which I have just named, will, in and of itself, create. But it's the combining of those together which add accuracy, right? And some you are probably better at than others, but it doesn't mean that you need to do all of these things. It's not just visualization that creates. It's not just feeling that creates. In fact, most of the time when I imagine, I'm not using feeling, right? The reason I'm giving you this explanation is because I want to explain to you how I came to this process right now, this revising process, this actual systematic approach. So in the end, what happened was I was devastated, screwed, finished, but I had finally found someone who apparently could prove and not only prove, but kind of co-sign the experiences that I've had without limitations. That person was Neville Goddard. And the one thing that I didn't know was revision, but finding revision before I hit my bottom, so to speak, or my last bottom, I knew that it worked because I had tested it. And therefore, I knew that I was going to revise every event that ever happened. So that is exactly what I did. So in a systematic approach, I knew that resentments had to go. I knew that fears had to go. I knew that bad memories had to go. I knew that anything that caused me to be the person that I was needed to go. It needed to be changed into something better and greater and more powerful and more loving, so to speak. So after I did that, like I said, that's when everything expanded. That's when my manifestation power grew. But I had to remove all of the bull between me and my God, my awareness, which technically there's nothing between, but the things that are in between are just continuously creating, right? So fears. So first of all, let me reiterate this. Patterns, beliefs, perceptions. Okay. What we do here is we list down who did what. So for resentments, right? And this can be for not just resentments, but any event that has happened that has caused us pain that we wish to revise, right? And we should do it with every event, right? Resentments, what we do is we write, who is it against, or the event? Who's involved? What happened? What did it affect within me? Romantic relationships, personal relationships, financial security, ambitions, self-esteem. And this is the part that's more controversial. How did I play my part here? How did I set this ball in motion? So if someone does something wrong to us, how can I be at fault? So what we can find is that we always have a part to play. And I'm not talking about in the manifesting world. I'm talking about in physical reality. Even if someone hurts me, and the point is not to put blame. The point is to poke a hole to say that we're not always the victim. We can't be the victim anymore. If we are the victim, then we will continuously be the victim, and we will receive what the victim receives, which is more victimhood, and we will just continuously be the victim. So we have to remove ourselves from resentment, pain, by choosing to accept that we played a role in causing us that hurt. And once we can do that, then the next step would be, what belief would have caused this event? Now we get into the manifesting way, right? What belief would have created this event? And then after that, what would be the opposite belief of that? So now we're getting into the solution. And then the final one is revising the event altogether. Now outlined, and I know that's a lot, but I have it all written here. Does that make sense? So, and the same goes with fears, right? The idea is to revise and remove all the negative stuff in the past. We can see what gave us the fear. Revise that. We can revise the fear itself. What would be your attitude if this fear was gone? And we imagine that. Or we imagine the problem, the event which made us afraid. We revise that or those, creating new assumptions, new beliefs, new ideas, all through imagining, all through imagining. It's only imagining, right? I mean, writing down to plan, but all to imagine. So we systematically go through and we list down one at a time though. So for instance, we would first think to ourselves, okay, so we talk about resentments, right? And again, I'm going to get into this more. We're going to try to go through this a little bit more quick, but it's like, okay, who did what wrong to me? James, right? Now, instead of going, what did he do? Well, who's the next person? Haley, Anne, Tom, one at a time. And the reason we do that is so that we don't get tied up in each story. We do this in a systematic way because we're not trying to relive the pains. We're trying to systematically remove these things. So instead of going across, James, he called me a name that affected my self-esteem. Instead of going that way, what we do is we go column after column after column. We do James, Brian, Tom, Ann, Kim, right? So it removes the emotional attachment to it, as if we're not trying to tell a story, we're just trying to write an inventory. Does that make sense? And then once we have our inventory, that's when we can revise everything. I'm going to get into the exact example, actually. Freedom. Again, when we analyze everything in the end, when we have this full inventory, that is the key to freedom. When we revise everything, that's when everything changes. So the process, again, here we go. Who is this about? Who caused the problem, right? So we'll just say, you say your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your specific person, your best friend, your father, your mother. In this case, I'll just write a woman's name. I'll just write Sally, right? Sally. What is the nature of what happened? She called me a name and then broke up with me, right? Now you notice here, I'm not going into explicit details, blaming people, any of that stuff, because the nature here is not to relive this whole thing, right? The nature is to just write down a systematic inventory so that we can later go in and revise it. So what did this affect inside of you? Self-esteem, personal relationship. This affected my romantic relationship, my self-esteem, and my security, and my ambitions, because I thought we were going to get married, we'll say, right? Is everyone following along with me what I'm doing right now? I'm making an inventory. Raise your hand. So Sally, she called me a name and then broke up with me. I mean, you could be more specific, like she called me whatever, and then whatever. Yeah, you could be more specific, but the idea is to try not to relive it, right? Now, what did you do to set the ball rolling, right? So again, now this is the part that can be confusing, where what did I do to cause, and I'm not talking about manifesting here, right? The whole point in this is to poke a hole in my idea that she's a horrible person or that it's all her fault, right? So if she called me, she said she wasn't interested in me, or she doesn't feel that love with me or something like that, right? What did I do to set the ball rolling, right? Maybe it was just I expected her to act differently. I expected her to stay with me forever, right? Now, again, I'm not talking about who's to blame. What I'm doing here, the reason I'm having you do this to see what did you do to set the ball rolling is it's your expectation that caused the hurt. We're only looking at what caused the resentment here. Does that make sense? Raise your hand. My expectation that she would never act that way is the reason I am now hurt, right? I'm not saying it's because I'm boring or because, that's not what I'm going with here. I'm going with the problem in me that is allowing myself to get hurt. Now, why am I doing this? Why am I even doing this? The reason I'm doing this is because we need to not create new resentments. And if we can get good at seeing this part in us, then I can stop expecting things, and that will allow me to stop getting hurt. Does that make sense? I know this is a little different than you've ever seen before. I know that. But when you watch this again, you're going to fully understand. I know this is a lot to take in, which is why I'm glad this is recorded. But so once we have this part, now we get into the manifesting part, right? If there was a belief that created this event, what would it be, right? I believe all women change and leave me, right? We'll say that's the belief, right? We could say that would have created this, right? That creates this. Right now, we're not going to exactly know this, right? But we're speculating, and we can write a couple for each one, right? Does that make sense? We're trying to define a belief, which, if true, created the problem in the first place, as far as manifesting is concerned. And the next step is now we're getting into removing this, right? If you had a belief, which if true would have prevented this from happening, what would it be? Right? If there was if I had a belief that was contrary to this belief and it could prevent this from happening, what would it be? It would be probably, all women remain in love with me and find me interesting, right? So I'm creating now a belief, a new belief, which if effective would have prevented this from happening. And then finally, we create the opposite of the event, the happy ending, and we revise that. We revise the event that happened. So what would be the opposite of this event here? She called me a name and broke up with me. We could say now again, this is going to vary depending on how much you can actually feel or imagine properly this thing. So it could be we remained the same. We remained together and she said she loved me. I know I spelled that wrong. My keyboard's messed up. That was bad. Or if we can't feel that properly, we can say she said she wants a little space, right? And that would be a different event, a different experience. So in essence, I'm going to summarize this. Because this is the meat and potatoes. I expect you to do this with every single event, right? My list had hundreds of things on it, and then I revised them all. So the process. We say the process, the event hurt. The event hurt. So first of all, who hurt me? Sally. What happened? She called me boring and broke up with me. What did it affect inside of me? It affected my romantic relationships, obviously. It affected my self-esteem. It affected my ambitions of getting married. It affected my personal relationships because now I have to tell everyone that she broke up with me, or I had to do that. What did I do to set the ball rolling? Right now, again, just to be clear, it's not to put blame on yourself. It's just to poke a hole in the idea that we're a victim. So if I never expected her to act a certain way, then I would have never been hurt. And if I was never hurt, then I would have never developed this resentment. If we can prevent ourselves from developing resentments, hurts, pains, fears, then we can revise events so much faster and remain non-reactive. Does everyone understand that? Raise your hand. If we cannot react, if we can remove expectation or stop getting hurt too bad, right? And the way we do that is by changing this belief or this attitude. We will prevent ourselves from building resentments, pain, all this stuff. We can revise so much easier. So this is important to the extent to which We can stop getting severely hurt. We can stop reacting so much. We can detach from this world, and we can get what we want much easier. We can revise much easier. We can manifest much easier. So just to summarize real quick, who's it about Sally? What did she do? She dumped me and called me boring. What did it affect? My romantic self-esteem and ambitions. What did I do? What was my problem? Why did this hurt me? Because I had expectations. I had expectations, right? And if I had attachment expectations to the 3D world and not the imaginal world. Next step. If there was a belief that created this event, what would it be? All women change and leave me. That manifested into Sally dumping me, right? If I had a belief which was good, that was the opposite of this, what would it be? All women remain in love with me, remain the same, and find me interesting. And now what is the opposite of the event? And we define the event. And then the idea is with our whatever we decide to do, if we want to script it, if we want to imagine it, I'm going to recommend that you take one sitting not one sitting, it'll take multiple sittings probably, but I'm saying after you create this full list and systematically imagine one after the other after the other. I mean, if you can get into the setting and do this, I can imagine 20, 30, 40 scenes all in one shot, more than that even. So, but I want to make something very clear here. We're going to do this one column at a time. So instead of going from, when I say column, I mean section, right? So instead of filling out about the whole thing about Sally first, again, I'm not trying to relive this pain. So what I'm doing instead is I'm going through column 1 first. All of column 1. I think of everyone who's hurt me, everyone who's pissed me off, everyone I have a resentment against, everyone that I'm afraid of. And I write them all down, one after the next, after the next, after the next, after the next. After I finish that section, then I go to column 2, section 2. Now I see Sally's number 1 on the previous section. So now I say, what are all the things that happened with Sally? Let's go. Boom. She broke up with me. That's 1. She called me a name. That's another. We had a fight. That's another. She stood me up. That's another. She was texting this person. He was texting this person. Yada, yada, yada. So that's, and then I move on to the next one, right? So the first person was Sally. Okay, then I go to mom. What did mom do? She said I would never make it. This and that, on and on and on. We do one section at a time. We don't go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think there's 7. We go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Then 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. The reason we do this is because it'll be so much faster. It's so much faster. It's way more systematic. You won't relive the hurts as much. You can modify and revise in a very systematic way, akin to an inventory, taking stock. Does that make sense of why I have it formatted that way? I know this is a lot, guys. You guys will all receive the recording to this. This is literally the crucial difference. If you don't want this, then you will probably not do this, right? You're probably not going to do this if you truly don't want the change, or if you don't want the change. But if you really want the change in your life, and you can see, if you can taste what you want, you can see what you want, but you have things that are inside of you that are preventing you, limiting thoughts, fears, doubts, indecisions, insecurities, memories. This is for you. This is not baby games. This is not nonsense. This is not some mystical bullshit. This is the answer. This is the key. If you want change, this is the process for you. This is the process for you. Now, again, some of this stuff, and let me make this point right here. Once you get to what is the opposite or happy ending, I'm going to get into this later, but the idea is you choose your own imaginal technique for this, right? Because all remain the same. So, but this is the systemized inventory that you are going to write, whether you want to. I mean, you do whatever you want. I can't tell you what to do, but this is the thing that brought me from near death to where I am today. So let's move on. So you may be asking, holy, or what? We got to realize the reason we're doing this is because the world in its totality experience to us that we have not set into motion. We are the operant power. It just gave me a notification, said my internet is unstable. Can you all raise your hand if you can hear me right now, see me? Perfect. If we blame, we have to understand we are creating this. The way we can prove this is by testing it. So if you don't believe that we are creating our entire experience, if you believe that other people are to blame, you have a little bit of work to do, but that's not an issue. You can prove it very easily by looking at what has happened in your world and tracing it back to the thought that created it. If we blame people, we will build up our resentment. We will never forgive anybody, and we will consistently create what we don't want to create, which is the pain over and over and over and over again. If you really take a good look, think about the person that you are, the way that you act. Are you acting this way based on fear? Are you playing games? What is it that you're doing? Are you hiding? Are you afraid? Are you even your moral standpoint, right? Your morals, the things that you stand firm upon. Ask yourself why. Who told you those things? Why did you do those things? Is it out of fear? Is it because someone told you to do this? Is it your mother, your father? Were you hurt by someone? Is this why you're acting the way that you're acting? This is where we go and we revise everything, right? So if we build resentment or have sharp memories, they will be recreated. We must take the blame both in the world, which means this part, what did I do to set the ball rolling, right? That's in the world, your actions. How is it your fault, your perception, your belief of getting hurt? Not what they did, but what got you hurt, right? Because we need to prevent that from happening. That's why we are identifying it here. And without, which means that we are creating it through our beliefs, through keeping memories alive, through resentments, through fears, through doubts. Now, when it comes to, what do we got here? Analysis. In the end, what we're going to have is an exhaustive list. Actually, I'll take a couple questions real quick, and then we gotta get going on this. And if you have questions, make sure you're sending them to the Q&A. Hey, Cam, I already answered. Oh, you sent that a while ago. I see. Sorry, someone was sending it via chat. Pardon me, forget that. Can you have more than one new belief, like a new belief for each thing that was affected inside of you from the hurtful event? Yes, go crazy on this. Sometimes actually that's what you want to do, is probably cover up the potential negative belief with 2 or 3 positive beliefs. Is forgiveness necessary, or can we just forget that person or what happened? Well, it kind of goes contrary. You don't really forget anything. Maybe you forget it in your analytical mind, but it's always existing in your subconscious mind. If you don't forgive, then you're not believing that you actually created it. And if you're not believing you actually created it, yes, this could work in chart form. Beth, yes, this can absolutely work in chart form. It's perfect for chart form. That's exactly how I did it. Mine was hundreds of items long. But if you don't forgive, then you don't truly believe that you have created it. Now, I'm not saying you have to. I'm not saying you have to do anything. You can do whatever you want, right? This is your experience, your world. But one thing I want to make a point of is this technique. It's not even that it's advanced, but it requires some premise. And that premise is that you are the operant power. I would consider going out and testing it because the results may be limited slightly if you don't believe that. You will still get extraordinary results. And here's the thing, even if you do 10% of this, or if you say you do 100%, your life will be miraculously different. If you do 80%, it's going to be miraculously different. So don't beat yourself up. If you can't bring certain things up, then don't hurt yourself. Don't harm yourself. The point is, but eventually, like for me, the things that I could not bear to look at, I was able to look at about 9 months later, generally, as time went by and whatever the case may be. So it's up to you. There's no judgment either way. Sky, I'm grateful that you found it powerful and helpful. When you do a revision scene, do we need to loop it? How long should we do the scene for? It's up to you. Generally what happens though is once I start to get in the, like when I did this probably around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and what I did was I just sat there after building this inventory over a few weeks. I just sat there and I got in the zone, and then I would close my eyes, imagine something for like 10 seconds, fix it, go to the next one, or remember 2 or 3 of them. Best to do one at a time though. And just imagine whatever it takes for you to the best of your ability to get that scene, the altered scene in your imagination. What if I thought of a memory that was unpleasant while watching this, but told myself, no, I don't want to think about that now, and let myself feel the emotions, for example? I guess I'm afraid of planting a seed. This is an extremely important question. Extremely important. I want everyone who's listening right now, raise your hand. I'm gonna read the question, but this is everyone stop writing, stop whatever you're doing, listen to this. What if I thought of a memory that was unpleasant while watching this, but told myself, no, I don't want to think about that now, and let myself feel the emotions, for example? I guess I'm afraid of planting the seed. Will that not plant it? If you are, this is critical. If you have this memory, when you bring it up, you are petrified of it. You do not want to relive it. You hide from it. You run from it, right? You're covering it, right? It's still in your awareness. It's still in there. It's just covered up. The price that you can pay for never looking at it can be higher than looking at it, because it will continuously be radiating different flowers of manifestations. Now, this is not meant to scare you, because if you've been doing it already, then you already know what's been happening. Probably little, maybe nothing here, little here and there, right? But it will never stop is the thing, right? The best bet is to face it, right? If you face it, the odds are is it's not going to create. It will not create. Very likely it will be a little more than just suppressing it, right? But as soon as you deal with it, it will vanish once and for all, right? So opposed to having you want to be free. You want to be free. That's where the power comes from, freedom. The closeness with God comes from the lack of resentment, fear, insecurity, all of that stuff. To this day, I continuously still work on my true identity. I still remove things from the past, right? Things that I didn't realize during my first or second inventories. And I'll do it regularly, right? This is why I talk about daily. When things come up, I write them down. This is what I'm talking about, because I'm continuously sharpening and revising. So nothing will be perfect. You will never get the full thing ever. I ask though, I ask my subconscious to reveal to me these things that are creating that I need to remove. And I know when they come because I've asked for them. So they make themselves aware to me, known to me. It's a good question, but remember, covering it, it's still in your mind creating. The subconscious is the creator. It's not the analytical mind. It's not the mind that you bring it to the forefront of. It's the subconscious mind. So it will be raining seeds, so to speak, probably small seeds. If you haven't dealt with it already, then you already know the fruit that that is bringing you. But removing it once and for all and facing it will allow it to never happen again, and you'll be free without that pain, without that fear, without that belief, without that whatever. Does everyone understand that? Raise your hand. But again, it took me months, 6 months, 9 months and I think of one thing specifically. I could not think about this one thing. I just couldn't think about it. It was so fearful inside of me. It took me 6 or 9 months to look at it finally, but eventually I did. I wrote down that I was able to, and eventually I was able to. What if you didn't do anything to cause it? Case in point, parental religious programming. The fault, like here's the thing. It's not, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that because there's multiple possibilities of what you mean by that, but we're not saying whose fault it is. We're saying, how did you get affected by it? What is it in your life that allowed you to be affected by it? I'm not saying whose blame it was. That's a very important difference, right? If someone screwed you over, then they screwed you over. But we need to poke a hole in that theory by saying, well, I could have eventually stopped listening to them, right? Something. It's not to cause anyone blame. That's not the point. The point is to say, like, I could have done something different and this would have changed the outcome. The reason for that, again, is because we don't want to blame anyone. If we're to blame anyone, it's to be ourselves because we can change ourselves. Can you revise for someone else? Yes. Do you have to list the persons and events in chronological order or just in the order you remember each one? In the order you remember each one. Can we make the inventory in the computer or by hand? I did mine on the computer, although generally, yeah, I did mine by the computer. In one of the slides, you said that our expectations set the ball rolling, i.e. Sally calling us names. Would it not be your expectation of Sally leaving rather than your expectation of her staying and getting married? Rita, if you're looking at it from the manifesting point of view, then yes. But in that specifically, this is important. In number 4, we're looking at it from the human point of view. We're looking at it from the human point of view. We're looking at what caused us to react in a way that made us resentful or hurt or painful. Well, it was because I thought she would act differently. So for instance, if you called me stupid, if my expectation is that you must treat me with pristine honor and you called me stupid, then I'm going to have resentment against you, right? So in effect, it's my expectation that you should treat me with honor. That's the problem here. And we're not talking about fault. We're talking about the problem. There's a difference between fault and problem. Because if I had no expectations, or I expect people act how they act, then it's not going to offend me if you called me stupid. I'll just be like, oh, whatever. No surprise there. People are people. Huge difference, because the resentment is what will continuously create. But me letting it go isn't going to create anything again. Does that make sense? What did you say if things were done to you in your childhood regarding the question, what did you do to cause the event? And if you're talking about the manifesting way, when you're a child, this is a great question. The rule of thumb is I don't put blame on myself before the age of 15 per se, 15, 14, maybe even 16, depending on what it is. So I just let that, I will say like that, that I am not the creator. And it's for the sake that at that point I had zero control. I was under the thumb of my parents. However, it's still, we must revise. We still must revise. It's a good question. Important question. I'm glad that this is the best workshop ever, Victoria. That means a lot. What about an event where you witnessed a death, my father's? How can you alter emotional pain and beliefs that arise from something like that? Everyone, it leaves me and the like. So what I would probably do is, in this case, I would probably revise the way that I, like the verbiage that I talk to myself, like that I spoke to myself after, like, and I would also focus on the belief more than the event, because everyone will die, right? That's not something, I would not focus on revising a death. What I would focus on revising is my reaction to the death, right? Obviously, that's a tragic event. That is something that will affect you. It has affected me, right? I lost my brother. What can I do? Well, we obviously go through grieving stages, so we're not supposed to suppress. But even if we wrote down as a revision to that your reaction was acceptance instead of fear, right? Accepting and feeling fine and gratitude for life, so to speak, or gratitude for having spent all the years that you have with him. That's a possible difference. I'm not telling you that that is the solution, but whatever may resonate with you on that effect. I want to change one of my acceptance letters to be in my desired school. I got my school letter 2 years ago. What would happen to my present? Some opportunity would likely open. If you revise that letter, what I think would happen would some opportunity would arise and you would be able to make that decision. It wouldn't just, your school wouldn't just evaporate, right? So I would still do it. What is our true identity? Are we I am? Are we the inner God? That is our true identity, yes. That is our only true identity, yes. We are God. That is the true identity. The false identity is Joseph. I won't get too deep into this, but think of this as a dream, right? Now, again, whatever I say something, I'll give you a way to experiment and test it, right? I've heard these terms before. This is a dream, or nothing is real, right? You think that the master who's saying this has tapped into some reality, like, whoa, he must see something that I can't. I must practice what he practices. So people who say things like, you can enter different dimensions, or this is all a dream, or the past is not real, right? If they don't tell you how, then they're probably just quoting some book that they read, but they don't know the explanation. So as far as the inner God, the I am, it's like, maybe we should talk about this another time, because I don't want to get too off the topic. But the point is that we are the I am, we are God. We can prove this by understanding what that means. There's something that's aware of being me, right? There's something that's aware of being Joseph. That is the true I am. Everything else changes, but the I am remains the same. Inside that I am is all the perceptions, feelings, ideas, and whatever. Again, all that changes. If my true perception is I am, if my true self is I am, and everything inside I am is creative, then therefore I am creative. And if I am that creative power, then I should be able to manifest whatever, and such and so forth. There's so many different ways to prove this to yourself, but not even just through saying like, I am God. Like, always ask why when someone says something, because if they can't explain it and they're trying to get you to just think of some really crazy stuff, man, they don't get it. They don't get it. This stuff is all gettable. This stuff is all understandable. It just takes the right perception, right? Which is, again, a lot of what I teach hurts people's egos, but it's only my true experience. It's my true experience, man. So anyway, enough on that. After you've done this process and start imagining, do you picture the bad scenes first? No, you don't even picture the bad scenes. The only reason you're writing down those bad scenes is because you want to be able to write the opposite of them. You need to know in black and white what they are. Does the awareness know how to arrange the sequence of events? All things exist within awareness, all infinite knowledge, infinite power. Anything that can ever be thought, experienced, and felt is within awareness and is accessible by awareness. So all with our finite mind, we revise the scene, and then the infinite mind moves the parts together. Who creates then before that age if it wasn't us? I'm not even saying that we didn't create it, but here's the thing, is that our experiences are all intertwined, right? We have our own experience, but even I am influenced. But once I have my own leg to stand on, my own imagination, I am in effect the operant power. I'm glad this is the missing key. What is your suggested revision technique for a recurring health issue? I would probably do imaginal acts, and I would probably modify as many things as you thought were adding to that health issue. I would probably also imagine an alternate, prognosis, the initial one, and every one after. No, before the age of 15, we are absolutely creating. Sorry, let me answer this question publicly. We are absolutely creating, but it gets muddy because we're not even fully developed yet, and we're under our parents' thumb. So I don't take blame in the, like, when I say blame, I mean, I was a child, right? And I don't mean a child, we're teenagers. That's not even really a child, but a child who is not under, you can't get out of your parents' house. I just personally choose, like, I will still revise the events. And if I can't, like, a lot of this comes in, like, these questions, the way I'm answering this comes a lot when it's like, well, what if you were abused? What if you were this? What if you were that? How is that your fault? And these are the things that I'm like, that I don't blame the person for this, right? Although it's quite possible that if they were watching TV or if that was a thought that came in their head, then that would be involved. But more so, the answer comes down to being, do we have full control over what we're creating? Or am I a child with a child mind, you know? If I had to spend a large chunk of my savings on one of my homes, but want to revise that event so I didn't spend it, what would be a good way to do that? I would probably imagine that the mold never was there, or after the first treatment or a small treatment, you realize that it was all taken care of and it was perfect. And then I would probably reiterate that I am so grateful that it only took this much and cost this much to take care of the problem. That is probably what I would do. Or that when the inspection came, there was no problem and everything was good to go. So you go through this exhaustive process. How do you know when you are at the end and you can move on to manifesting? Good question. So my rule of thumb is that once I think I have reached the end, I put it down and I take 2 days,
or 3 days. And on the third day, I look at it again and I say, do I remember anything else? If the answer is no, then I proceed. So I want to go on to the next process, which is analysis. Okay. Analysis. So did I do this already? Once we have the exhaustive list of all the problems, effects, beliefs, fears, events, and modifications, we can identify patterns. Generally what happens is we'll have the same fear, the same insecurity, the same, there'll be like 3 or 4 common ones throughout all of these problems that we see, whether it be, I'm always afraid that my financial security is going to be messed up. I'm always afraid, or someone's always hurting my ambitions, or my romantic relationships are always messed up, or people are always treating me in this way. This is, and you will see the patterns, and we can modify and alter those through assumptions. So again, all of this list can be used, right? So once we find these patterns, we just create assumptions to remove them, right? If we continuously see that people are impeding upon, or we're failing in a romantic relationships, the amazing thing is we'll have a specific roadmap of what happened. And so we can find the patterns extremely well through this process. And finding these patterns, then we create the opposite of the belief. So we say, like, say you get dumped 7 times by guys and they leave you, or say you keep investing money poorly, or say your finances are always in disarray. You look at the patterns, and then you can create brand new assumptions or beliefs based on those patterns. So if it's money always eludes me, or men always leave me, or women always leave me, or my health is always up and down, or I'm always gaining weight and losing weight. And we can see this we have 174 items here, and half of them have that one belief, and the other half have that other thing, or a third, or a quarter. And of course, there will be some outliers, right? There will be some outliers. And we have a lot of data here. And so what we do is we create new assumptions. We say, I maintain my healthy frame, or my relationships are secure and reliable, right? Anything or multiple things. And we do this in a systematic way. Like we go through and we say, oh, I have 24 of these, 17 of these, 8 of these, 49 of those. Wow. And then we go in and we say, okay, what's the opposite of this? 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 What would be a belief which would negate all of this? And then boom, we fix those. We imagine those. We write those down. We assume those. We have inner conversations with people, them telling me that I am that person. Whatever it takes. Jesus, we've gone over far. So modification. We've already gone over this. Systematically imagine the modified scenes one after the other. Expectations. Once we write the scenes and imagine them, the world will begin to change. Don't be surprised if you have crazy, unexplainable experiences. And you're going to be free. Free. Your power will surge. You want to talk about expansion? Beliefs will be shattered. And you do not have to do anything for the effects to take place. Your job is to imagine. It's God's job, awareness's job, to refract out the changes in this experience here. That is the solution. That is the solution. We don't have to force anything. We don't have to force change. It will all begin to change. It will all begin to change. And that's it. So the next one is going to be on, this isn't set actually, but what I'm thinking it's going to be on finances, security, happiness, freedom, that type of stuff labeled under money, and visualization / effective ways to impress the subconscious mind. So the most effective techniques, destroying limited beliefs, imagining stuff, whatever the case may be. I'll take a couple questions and that's it. Remember, we have the Q&A coming up. So if you're not a part of that, you should get a part of that. All right. So what do you guys think about that? This is really, this should be like, I've told people about this before. They've said this should be a book. The workbook's on the VIP website, Eric. All right, y'all can, I'm glad you all like this. I know it's work, right? This is work, but this is definable work. This is work that will change your freaking life.